right, well, welcome to Math Leads this evening. We're excited for our topics. Angie Godfrey will not be with us this evening. She had another commitment come up. And so Courtney and I will kind of go through this together with you. And then we're hoping at the end that we'll have a little bit of time to possibly end early this evening. And if you're interested, we can hang out and visit some more about logic model or any other questions or things that you might have. So kind of leave the end of the evening a little bit open to address any questions or thoughts or topics that you would like to discuss. We're ready to go. Courtney, you want to?
Yeah. So I just thought that for my part, we kind of take a minute to review some of the stuff that we've gone over just to kind of refresh us, and some of it relates to what we're doing. So if you want to click that once, April. Oh, yeah. Okay. Individually bulleted. You could do 2 more. There you go. Okay. So these are the things that we have in the past sessions talked about. Leadership styles and kind of power and power dynamics and what that means for leadership. And then choosing teams, having a diverse team, preempting conflict, theories of motivation. We had a session where we talked about values, mission, and vision. Last time we talked about entry plan, kind of how to enter into, I guess, to getting your plan started or your project. And we talked about the reflective cycle. That was the unaware, unconscious, aware, and then we also showed that matrix. So just a refresher. And then today we're going to talk about within leadership, the decisions we make and filtering those decisions. Talk about thinking, systems thinking, and building relationships. Then I think I have, oh yeah, next week we'll talk a little bit about organizational change or changes within an organization too. So, all right. Okay. So we're just going to talk a little bit about leadership, and this is really obvious, but I think it's important to revisit is that kind of the heading says it all, that leadership matters, school leadership matters. There's a lot of research dedicated to school leadership. It shows the importance of it and the impact it has on the success of a school, for teachers, for students. And as part of Math Leads, you are now considered, I mean, maybe you were a leader before. I don't know what you were doing before, but you're definitely in that realm of school leadership. And so the fact that leadership matters, however, can be a double-edged sword. So like poor leaders can bring schools down. Strong leaders can elevate schools. So that's why we want to examine all the aspects of leadership to make sure we're kind of not being poor leaders, or we're going in the right direction. You can click, there we go. Okay, so because leadership matters, a big part of school leadership is making decisions. And that's part of what you did just to decide what project you were doing, right? So as you're making decisions about your project, you want to consider filtering your decisions. And so this means kind of like you're running your decisions by your team, if you put one together, or if you're working with a team, or at the very least, you have maybe something like a thinking partner, someone that you bounce your ideas off and get a different perspective. And so this is one reason we kind of discussed building a team earlier, because you want to have a variety of people on your team, including even some that will challenge you, and especially ones with different perspectives. So leaders should have vision, but also want to filter that vision and the decisions through others and through a lot of diverse perspectives. Okay. Have some random red lines. That's okay. So when we talk about filtering decisions, okay, so for example, let's say your project has something to do with math fact fluency, increasing it at your school. I actually can't remember if this was someone's project or not. I seem to think it was. All right. Lori, was that you raising your hand? Yes. Okay. I wasn't sure. I thought I remembered someone doing that, but I chose it because it's a little bit of a heated topic. Sometimes there's a variety of opinions on what this means, what this looks like.
Ton of decisions
So,
to
what might
filter
be
through. In
some of the
fact, I even talked with some of
decisions
our team
that
today, and
you might make around this goal? Okay, so you
we're
want
still
to
there and trying to
um,
decide,
increase the
what
level of
parts can we do, what
fluency
parts do we
in your
just have to put
students
on hold,
around math facts.
and
So what might be
and
some
going
of the
back
decisions
to
that you
what
make?
was our
So I'm going to
original
open that up
what were our
to
original
unmute and
reasons and thoughts on this. And honestly, it started with two ideas. One, they need to know their facts. And two, um, it was an idea of something to do in the afternoon when we have more trouble with behaviors. And so we wanted to give them a chance to just practice and play games. So those were kind of the two things. And, but it's been important to filter those decisions all along because it just kept getting bigger and bigger and we had to come back to what we could do. So it's, I'm not sure I'm really answering your question, but there's just so many decision trees.
yeah. Thanks for jumping in and sharing that. I appreciate that. And what I love is how you said we had to keep coming back to kind of why we were doing this. And that was like the big part of listing, vision, mission, and goals is that you can always come back to that. I know in like large organizations, that's really helpful when things are going wrong too. And there's some disorientation happening. So coming back and going, okay, wait, what is our most basic why of doing that? So I love that. And I love how you're saying, I have my team and we're talking about it and all of that. So I just wanted to kind of have one example. April, you can go to the next one. Thank you. So I'm going to give you all a little bit of time to talk in a breakout room. April, I'm thinking we'll just do partners. And just take a few minutes. We'll send you to the breakout room, but spend the first 2 minutes maybe writing down or thinking about the decisions you had to make in this process, the process of implementing your project, and then take turns sharing, and then talk about if you filtered them, if not, who you filtered your decisions through, or who you would like to do that, and a little bit just about that process. So we'll just spend like 2 minutes thinking about it and 5 minutes kind of sharing out. And April's got those rooms ready. So if you want to join one.
Oh, you know what? I think I'll pause the recording. We're all back now. Let me get our screen shared. All right, Courtney.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm sure there were a lot of different decisions that you've all been making and we're discussing. What I want to ask is, who are some of the people that you've been using to filter your decisions through? And if you guys want to just share, unmute.
April and Angie.
Great resources.
My department head.
Mhm.
I have gone back to my resources that I'm using to help me, just going back and rereading and seeing if I missed something that can guide me a little better. And it's been helpful.
Great. Anyone else? Okay.
I'm partnering with my grade level, partner. So I talk with her because we're doing it together. So we kind of have to agree on things. Not kind of, we have to agree on things.
Yeah, which is just add the level of complexity. I heard Pat say, well, I'm just kind of on my own on this, and that there's good parts to that and bad parts to that. There's probably less compromise if you're on your own. So that can make it easy. And then you just have to be careful to check yourself, All right, you can go to the next one, April. So we're going to talk a little bit about frameworks and lenses. Really, it's this idea of lenses of what we're seeing through that we could potentially miss because someone else is looking at the same thing through a different lens. So as a teacher, when you make decisions, you primarily only think of your students. I wouldn't say only, but I know when I was a teacher, I almost felt it was a luxury that I just need to worry about my students. That is the most important thing to me. After that, it was probably how would this decision be seen by parents, and then maybe leadership. But really, I could focus on the student. So has anyone ever made a decision for their students, let's start there, and got pushback from someone other than the students?
I did, and it was kind of surprising who pushed back on it. So I did the building thinking classrooms over the summer, and I decided I'm going to defront my classroom while I can come in this summer after they've cleaned the building. And so I sent in a request for cords for my computer so I could actually connect to the board and all of this. My principal was all for it. A few of the people who I need to work for, all for defronting my classroom. Aside from the district tech person is the person who pushed back and was like, why do you need to do this? Why do you need the cords? Why do you need to be doing this? And I did not have answers right off the bat because I was not expecting the tech person to be the one who pushed back the hardest on what I was doing in my room for my students. So that surprised me.
Yeah. And so that's a perfect example of that tech person is probably looking at this thing from a completely different lens than you were. You were like, I'm doing this for student learning. And the tech person is thinking, how are we going to make this work? It probably wasn't thinking about student learning at all. And so ideally, we're filtering our decisions through these different lenses, but that one would be tricky. You wouldn't even really foresee that, right? And so I think that's one of the differences between being a teacher and moving into leadership roles is that you can't just look at your universe through one lens. And like I was saying, I felt like that was a luxury in teaching. And I would recognize well, yeah, I know that that's hard for admin, but this is what I want to do, right? And I'm going to go for it. And if it's a problem, fine, you can bring it to me. But I don't need to worry about that kind of admin end until I need to worry about it. So those in leadership, they have to consider the bigger picture of who is impacted and what the ripple effect may be. And the people in the picture, so in this picture here, they're all looking at the same thing, but you can see they have different colored lenses, right? So they're all going to see it a little bit differently. And so that's kind of what we're thinking about. That's okay. You can go, April. Excuse me. So one way school leaders consider different lenses is through these 4 frameworks. You can call them lenses or frameworks. I kind of like the idea of lenses. I think they're technically called frameworks. And this is from the book, Reframing the Path to School Leadership. And so these frameworks are political, human resources, structural, and symbolic. So you can go to the next one. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about these, and these are just good to have on your radar if as you're going through decisions and as you're leading this one project, but can lead to more and more projects, more and more leadership. And so thinking about this. So the structural framework is how is this going to work? And I feel like this was the tech guy. He was like, what do you mean? How's this going to work? I'm going to have to run all these wires, right? And so that's one lens we need to think about. And admin has to think about that all the time. So people that are creative thinkers and visionaries, they'll have these big ideas, but then someone has to say, but wait, how are we actually going to do this, right? So we always have to look at that lens as well. You can go to next one, April. Thank you. And then there's human resources. So people's wants and needs and really considering the employee. So, if we say something like, I think, we should have a 10-hour school day, right? because that's what's best for student learning. So one person might go, well, how are we going to do that? How does that work with buses? And then human resources are thinking of the people, are they contracted for that many hours? Are people what's that going to look like for retention, morale? Is this worth it? Right. So really looking at it through the people lens, and especially the people in the organization. Okay. And then the political one. So what are the optics of this? And what are potential conflicts? So we're going to a 10-hour day. That might look good. We're a dedicated district, right? Or it might look bad depending on who you ask. And so school leaders have to look at the optics all the time, because who is looking at a lot of this is I think parents, right? A lot of it, like, okay, what is this? We might even know this is a good thing. I'm not saying 10-hour school day is a good thing. I'm just using an example, but we might know something is a good thing, but what does this look like to parents, right? What does this look like to the community? Let's say you go to a 4-day school week. What are the optics of that? Does that mean, is it sending an implicit message that we don't care, we don't want to work as much, or is there a whole other side to that needs to be considered? And then what are the conflicts? Okay, and then the symbolic. This one's a little bit trickier, maybe less pertinent, but I think a lot of it, the symbolic, is kind of like this underlying deep meaning of things. One thing I thought about with this one is here in Pocatello High School changed their mascot. They were the Indians for a long time. And when I went there, and I graduated 2000. So in that era, they talked about changing the mascot. And then I think it just changed last year. So 20 years later, and the conversation was going on before that. Right. And so why is that so hard to break from that? Part of that is the tradition, the culture, right? The sense of meaning with it. And people get tied to that. This is the way we do it. This is our culture. This is the way we do it around here. So sometimes even something like fact fluency, trying to change that. And it's like people are tied to, no, this is how I learned it. We had time tests and, things like that. So, okay, you can go to the next one. Okay. And my normally silent dog is not, I don't know if you can hear back here, but I'm going to let him out real fast.
I don't know if some of you have heard a little bit, or maybe a lot, or maybe nothing about our school district, West Bonner, up here in the north. And that whole political piece is just, when it becomes an issue, it's a big issue.
Yes.
And our primary struggle has been not with parents, it's been with community members who are not parents, who don't want to pay a levy tax. And they have all these suspicions about the school district wasting money or embezzling money or hiding money or whatever.
Interesting. I'm like trying to think what lens they're looking through. Like maybe that political lens. But yeah, I'm sure the people making those decisions, right, are having to think about all of these things and how it trickles down. And so that's where really what we're talking about here is systems thinking. And so the idea that what we do as leaders has the potential to impact a greater number of people than a decision you might make as a classroom teacher. And it's not saying it's a more important work or decision. It's just, it is typically in a leadership position, it trickles down and it just has a greater impact, and you have a greater sphere of influence. So you can see kind of the dominoes there. Just we do one thing and maybe there's other things going to happen that we didn't perceive. And then here's a model of systems thinking that I kind of like. So it's thinking of that big system, right? And so we've got all of these lenses and all of these people, and how does it work together? And your project could have, it might just be in your grade level, and some of you are doing things bigger than that. And even just in your grade level, it could still impact systems. So we've talked a lot about considering different perspectives and looking through lenses and filtering decisions. And we talked a little bit about, so if we look at The one with the brain, there's the consider different perspectives. And we've talked a little bit about foresight. I like that foresight, not forecasting. So we're not just going to kind of guess, we're really looking ahead, hopefully talking to people and filtering those decisions ahead of time, getting ahead of it. And then where the footsteps are, this is what you're doing with your projects, moving forward with small actions. And then what I like, I feel like you have to be in the game for a while to look for those patterns, right? So as a teacher, you might be really strong. As a school leader, might need more time in the game if you haven't been doing that much, but you start to see those patterns, right? And okay, yeah, if I do this, I mean, you've probably heard it in meetings, said it yourself. Parents are going to be upset if we do A, B, and C, right? And so those are the patterns. You've been around to see that. And then the one I really like is this zoom in and zoom out. I use it all the time. I use it in my personal life and my professional. It just helps you focus on your goal by zooming in to that goal and then being able to take a step back and zoom out and look at the big picture or the system in which your goal or vision is situated. And that's a little bit like what you were saying with the math facts is that you zoomed in and you were almost getting into the weeds too much. You had to zoom out. Okay, what actually are we trying to do here? And so that visual of zoom in, zoom out can be really powerful in any type of leadership, making decisions. You can zoom out and then you could start thinking, who does this impact, right? Who do I need to talk to about this, or what do I need to preempt? All right. And then, so on the left is just the model of kind of a systems thinking model and how it fits into your work. And I just like that. I came across that, but then you can see how very similar it is to the framework that we've been working with and the imperatives shown on the right. So it's kind of like self, team, system, and this is self, colleagues. It doesn't say system, commitment to others, but very similar. Okay. And then this is our last part here, is just building relationships. So does anyone know where what this is from? The key to this business is personal relationships. It's a little niche. It's a pretty old too, actually. This is from the movie Jerry Maguire, if you've ever seen that. It's Tom Cruise is in it, and he has a mentor. And just every so often, his name's the Dickie Fox. And every so often, there's like a 30-second clip of him giving advice in his office. And this is one of his. He says, the key to this business is personal relationships. And I thought about that. And I think I know in business, that is huge. I think it's so huge in education as well. And so how does building relationships relate to what we have already discussed today? And that is an open question to the group.
You need relationships to have people to get feedback from and run your decisions fast.
Definitely. What else?
I think because I mean everything's turned into like PLC, you know what I mean? Like working together. And so if you're not all on the same page, it can really make your PLC pretty miserable if you're all kind of fighting and all have different ideas, you know. So I think because schools are trying to build that team, I don't know, the PLC, that teaming, you know, I think relationships are even more important. Especially teachers, like we hold things so serious and near and dear to our hearts too, that I think in order to have change, you really have to have a good relationship. Because we hold those kids so near and dear to our hearts. It's hard to change things.
Well, I think too, people who might push back, like my tech guy, if I'd had, a better relationship, he probably would have been a lot more trusting and been like, okay, I'll figure something out. I can make this work. Like it would have, gone a lot smoother because we could have communicated better. We would have, if we'd had a pre-existing relationship, but not having that, there's less trust. There's more pushback. There's like almost like, are you making my life harder on purpose sometimes? On those days you're frustrated, but having a relationship removes that.
Mhm. Yeah, I love how you were thinking even bigger, right? Building that relationship. And then also we were talking about small, like with the people I work with every day, and then the people I might not work with very often at all. Anyone else want to share? I think it starts as a teacher in the classroom, right? Just those relationships with our students. That's always kind of the advice I would give new teachers is, whoops, hold on, is if you build those relationships with your students and they're positive, healthy relationships, you can get them to do about anything, right? So like that's the most important thing to me. And that's the first place we need to start. But now, again, we don't have the luxury of just thinking about just our students. As a leader, you have to think bigger and almost get a little bit a little bit strategic about it. And so for example, I attended a superintendent's meeting to show my face, to introduce myself, because sometimes there's parts of our job, sometimes we do research. Well, I can't do research in a district if I don't have approval of the superintendent. So are my odds better or worse if they've seen my face, they know me, they've heard me talk, right? So that was a kind of a strategic move of a first step in building a relationship. And so that's something you want to be thinking about too. Who can I start building relationships with? And it's like just with that, the tech maintenance person, if you'd had that relationship, you're probably right. And so I know I definitely also I build a relationship with the person that's doing maintenance in the building all the time, because when you need them, right? And so you want to have that. And so yeah, I love thinking like kind of that zoom in, zoom out. So, and some people are good, natural building relationships, and some people are not. Like I feel more comfortable with kids. And so I'm like, oh yeah, we get along and I can build relationships. And then I'm more awkward with adults. And so I've had to push myself. And so I encourage you to do that. If you're not just like this super extrovert, be thinking about that. Who do you want to kind of start building relationships? And then what are some ways that you can do that? And like I said, just showing up to an event, showing any interest, send an email, introduce yourself, anything like that, because the time might come where you need to work with them. And then, of course, building those relationships with those who you work with, right? I think you work with them every day. It's pretty horrible if you don't have that good relationship. So that's kind of how that ties in, is as we're trying to implement our mission and our vision, thinking about the system we're impacting and then the stakeholders and the people in that it might impact, and then trying to kind of preempt some of that conflict or pushback. So yeah, as you move forward in your project, urge you to look at larger systems, filter your decisions if you're not doing that already, think of the stakeholders. And before I pass it off to April, are there any questions or comments on anything we covered tonight?
I wanted to make a comment. um, yeah, you've talked a lot about the strategic moves, and I think the looking for patterns in people, in my personal experience, and I love reading self-help books. But it's taught me, because I take things very personal, and so to look for patterns in people has helped me know how to approach them in a manner that makes me feel safe, and I'm also going to get a better response. And you made me realize that those patterns that I'm looking for are actually helping me create better moves, strategic moves, to build that relationship with people that are hard to build relationships with. Like I had this same thing happen when I tried to um, flip my classroom with the building thinking classroom. My pushback was the janitor. She was very she's been mean to me for 2 years. This is the first year we've been able to work things out, but it was really hard to get her to let me stick Velcro on the cupboard door so I could hang a whiteboard on it, but I've slowly found her little pattern, and this is the first year we've been able to get along.
That is such a good point, right? Seeing those patterns in people. I'm so glad you brought that up. And that's part of growing those leadership skills, is how to work with so many different people. And as a teacher, sometimes we can just, with another teacher, well, I don't like you, you stay on your end of the hall, I'll stay on mine. But you can't really do that when you start moving into bigger realms in education. And even with the janitor, that's I find that a little funny. I mean, but it's a very real example. You know, I couldn't stick Velcro on the door, right? Yeah. And another thing, there's a book called The Four Agreements, and one of them is there's four, I see Charity. One of them is don't take anything personally. And so if you could move into that, okay, they were mean, I'm not going to take it personally. And then you can think, what lens were they coming from? Right? What brought them there? This is their thing, it's not me, it's them. Unless it is you, then take a hard look. But that also is related to those lenses, right? And so they must have some lens that I'm not looking through that's bringing us to this conflict. So trying to be objective, and first thing you do is not make it personal. Oh, they're angry or they're mean. What's going on with them, type of thing. So thanks for bringing that up, Charity. Anyone else, questions or comments? Okay, well, excellent. And April's going to take over. I actually have to hop off too, but it was great to see you all. Thank you for being here on a Wednesday evening on the week of daylight savings. I bet today's the day everyone hit the wall. Okay, that's how it is in my family. I was telling April, slow decline with my kids. The grumpiness is really high with the sleep loss, and yeah. So I appreciate you being here. Appreciate the work that you're doing. You're all awesome. So I will see you later, and thank you, April.
Thank you. All right. So in studying this framework for leadership, it's really helping us to be able to name and define the roles that we can take on as leaders that will kind of have some impact on math education. And so we've looked at leadership actions related to empowering and nurturing a culture of productive professionalism. And with that, we really focused on beliefs and mindsets and how to build, again, those relationships and developing those sustainable practices that would support those shifts in education. We've also explored the key ideas of relating to advocating for high quality math teaching and learning by, using high quality curriculum that really defines what students will learn, and also exploring those effective math teaching practices, what we can do. And last month, or not, did we meet last month? Yeah, we did in February. It was January we didn't meet. So yeah, last month we looked at monitoring and acting on student evidence of learning, both at different levels, at that classroom level, and then at a team level, and then also at a district level, and how looking at that data can really highlight areas that we would want to shift and focus on. So today we're looking at the last guiding principle there's four of them, so this is the fourth one, and it's design structures that support high quality mathematics teaching and learning for every teacher. And you are already engaging in these ideas with your projects. So this guiding principle to designing and implementing structures is really centered around these three big ideas. And we want students to have these opportunities to engage and have access to this high quality math. But just as important as we want that goal for our students, it's really got to be intentionally designed structures that ensure that these opportunities are going to be successful. And that happens by removing barriers to grade level access, also creating those structures for customized support. But then really, really important is making sure that as teachers, we've got the tools, the knowledge, and also the resources to help every student. So it's more than just saying, here's a kid, this is where we want to make it happen. It's got to be, you know, system wide. We all know we need all those supports and those structures. And so part of that designing is being really intentional and looking at where are the gaps that need to be filled so that we can support our students the very best that we can. The other two big ideas are about, you know, designing and implementing structures that support mathematics teaching and learning and support professional learning in a way that's not just a sit and get or just a one and done, but really meaningful, ongoing professional learning. And kind of like what Courtney was saying, we can look at these three big ideas and ways that we can influence them in these three different spheres. And so for this year of Math Leads, we're really looking at just that, the first two spheres, commitment to self and commitment to colleagues. So we really do want our students to have access to grade level opportunities for all of them. And it begins with that self-examination of what might be keeping students from accessing grade level math. So looking kind of, you know, within our classroom, within ourselves, but also within our teams and what structures within the school are creating barriers for those marginalized students to really have opportunities and to engage. And we would also want to be mindful of the descriptions that we have of our students. Is it more of a deficit type language or a more asset-based language? And so these might be some comments that you may hear or probably have heard in different collaborative settings when we're working together. And I want to take a moment and think of, as leaders, how might we try and shift the conversation a little bit so it could be more asset-based language than deficit language. So we're going to go out into breakout rooms again. And I also want to, in chat, I'm going to put a link to some interactive slides. And the slides correlate with your breakout room number. There are 3 slides for each breakout room. And just kind of go through and brainstorm each of this deficit language stem and, you know, what might be a way we could shift the conversation or reframe it. And then after you've had a moment to brainstorm, please feel free to pull off the little, you know, shape so that you can see an example of what that might look like. And then I think we'll have about, I'll kind of start with 5 minutes to do that and kind of check in. And then if we need a little bit more time, I'll go on to add 5 more minutes. Do you think you want to do this in groups of 3 or 2? What do you think might be easier? So if you don't mind, just show me 2 or 3, kind of give me an idea. Or if you don't care, that's great too. 3s? Okay. So let me go back in. Right. Okay. There we go. So yeah, we'll have about 5 minutes, brainstorm some ways to shift this. And when you're ready for an example, go ahead and just pull off that bar. All right, welcome back. So you may not have had a chance to go through all of these. I think that's okay. Kind of gives us a way to play with it and kind of think about it. But what were some key ideas that came out in your groups that you were discussing about this deficit and asset language and how our role as a leader and how can we help make those shifts?
Honestly, the first thing that I noticed that makes me go, ah, is that, you know, all of the responses that you had underneath were, how can we, the teachers, do something better or different to make this kid or make these students, you know, be motivated, be interested, be excited. And I mean, obviously that is the answer, but it's kind of like, oh my gosh, more? I have to do more? That was how I was feeling.
We kind of talked about trying to look more at what the students can do rather than kind of focused on what they can't do. And do they need maybe some tools to help them be successful. Like maybe they don't know their math facts, but there is a time to practice the math facts. And there's a time that maybe it is okay to give them a multiplication chart or a calculator so they can do the grade level material and feel that success instead of getting bogged down in some of the calculations. Anyways.
That's another good point. Yes. Any other key ideas before we move on?
I mean, we did talk about how, yeah, it's important to identify, like, is the student not getting this concept, or are they just not able to do this concept because they're missing something more foundational, So like, we're working on fractions in 3rd grade, and some of the kids struggle with, multiplication because they can't add, because they don't have a good number sense. But like they're getting the concept of fractions, So those different.
Which is really important, where they can see that they do have those strengths and weaknesses, and it's not just across the board, you're just this in math totally. Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. Thank you. All right. So in addition to being reflective about, our system structures and our own beliefs, we want to work to develop this common understanding of the traits and characteristics of, what is high quality instruction materials. And then also, being able to work together to select those and kind of brainstorm and talk about how to use them in a way that's really meaningful for students. And several of us are having projects that are focused around materials and resources that we're using with students. So in the navigation guide, there is a link to a handout that's just a structure that would guide leadership actions in supporting the development of mathematics curriculum knowledge that you might find helpful if you want. Look there for that. Okay, so in our sphere of influence, where we're kind of making that commitment to colleagues, it's really all about leadership actions in relation to working with peers or other teams of teachers. It might be within our school or even across different schools within a district. And we're really working on creating structures that would influence, teacher beliefs and our actions about students' access to high quality curriculum and materials. Also building our collective efficacy, and then prioritizing that whole idea of this collaborative learning and PD that's really building those teams and really focused on the needs that we want to address and work on. So once we've established those opportunities and supports for students to engage with, that high quality math, we're shifting our focus to professional development that will help to close what our vision is that we've defined as a team and what's really going on. And I think we all recognize how much more valuable PD is when it, first off, got to be job embedded, right? There's already enough on our plate. So it needs to be job embedded. It's collaborative, and that it also just builds us as teachers. And we really explored this idea of PD that addressed implicit or unconscious biases in our November meeting when we talked about empowering and nurturing a culture of productive professionalism, along with all the great relationship topics that Courtney has been sharing with us. Oops, back here. Okay. So we could also be thoughtful about PD that focuses on content knowledge and instructional practices and ways that we can connect with our student lives so that the math really feels relevant to them. I was in a meeting last week and they were sharing an idea about how they're in a real rural community, and the task was talking about skyscrapers or something like a park. And, for kids, this wasn't really relevant. So the teacher just changed it up to be measurements of a chicken coop. And she talked about how there was just so much more buy-in and understanding, and students, they came to the table, they had something to share. They knew about chicken coops, and they were, figuring out area and perimeter. And one student had figured out, a 1 by whatever the length was. And another student was like, well, yeah, but your chickens would die. Like, they're going to need more space than that. So it was just really interesting to think about how when we can connect with our students' students' culture and bring whatever they've got from home. There's mathematics at home, and making that connection in our classroom, how powerful that can be. And we kind of explored these same ideas in our December meeting when we were talking about advocating for high quality curriculum and then those effective teaching practices that bring those opportunities around. So we can also support efforts to create teams that are really engaged in that meaningful, impactful collaborations. We talked a lot about how data can help lay the foundation and drive the work of teams, because that data can help us reflect on the standards themselves. As we're working to create those common formative assessments, we really have to dive in and know those standards and know what does mastery look like, and what's that progression that students make towards mastery of that. And then also looking at, well, you taught this lesson this way, I taught it this way, let's compare our scores. Oh, what did you do? It seemed like your kids really got this. And so bringing in, our teaching practices and sharing that knowledge and just building our capacity as a team to work on that. And Courtney has shared with us some really great ideas related to building successful teams. She spoke about, establishing roles as team members, our norms. And she also, I loved how she brought about that idea of phases of teams. Like, we kind of start out being really overly polite and friendly, and we all get along so great, to where then it starts shifting when we're bringing up some of our differences and ideas. We start to have a little bit more of a struggle. And then the next shift in that progression is kind of seeing that collective we, instead of, I think it was Nicole, you brought out being not so focused on our individualism and our passions that we have as teachers, but being able to pull away from that and being more collective. And then once we make that shift, then we really start moving into a team that is powerful and can do some amazing stuff. And probably in our careers, we've had opportunities to be in all of those spheres of teams and had experiences in each of those. So yeah. Okay. And this, so, when thinking the topics that we've chosen for our PD projects, there's such a wide variety in our group. So it's not like there's a hard, there's so many topics to choose from to focus on PD. There's too many topics, how do we narrow this down and really get down to what we want? But regardless of whatever topic we choose, there are research-based guidelines that identify what the elements are of effective PD. And so these little talking points here came from researchers Darling Hammond, Heiler, and Garner, and they reviewed 35 studies that showed positive correlations between PD, positive shifts in teacher practices, and positive student outcomes. And they came away with these 7 characteristics that they found common in all of those PDs. And so take just a moment. We can open up and share, or if you just want this to be a private reflective moment, that's great as well. But what are some of these aspects that you already have kind of incorporated into your project? And I also want to be mindful of thinking that just like teaching, in our classes, there's always something to learn every year. There's always something we can get better at. And this is the same thing, right? So just what's something we've already got going that's good that maybe we want to push just a little bit more?
My project is basically just my partner and I, my 3rd grade co-teaching partner, working together. So, it's collaboration. And, actively in our classrooms trying to implement more collaborative math talk between the students. So
yeah, so you've got that effective practice and all of
other
that.
than provides coaching and expert support, I'm not sure where that's coming from. We do have a couple math coaches who could maybe come in and observe us and give some coaching and expert support. I think that this is supposed to be us teaching as leaders, giving coaching and expert support to the other teachers that we're providing professional development to, but that's not quite how my project is working.
Well, I think it also ties into some of the literature that you're reading that's guiding your decision and kind of the focus of your project. I mean, that's expert sport right there as well.
I found that I like working with the teacher I'm working with, and she's very open to me telling about all the stuff I read about and learn in this class. But part of my goal was teaching my team about talk moves and just trying to encourage them to try them. That was one thing they were willing to commit. And I had my first 5-minute lesson during our PLC, and it was terrifying to take on the role of leader for that 5 minutes. And I just blubbered my way through it because I got so nervous because I don't feel like I'm a leader. I feel like I'm just part of their team, but I was in a leadership role for a few minutes. I didn't like it. And I made this beautiful PowerPoint and it was very organized, but that's something I got to work on.
It is a different dynamic, isn't it? It's hard to, yes, there's definitely a level there as we're part of it and then feeling that little shift. It's uncomfortable.
I've been doing PD. I do PD once a month with my teachers. And so it's been, focused on with the fluency and facts is kind of my project. And so it's been fun to get it's always real collaborative when we do it because it's a really small school. But it's been fun to see some of their feedback, in the hall or at lunch. The one of the youngest teachers, she'll say, "Oh, I tried this in my classroom and I found this. What do you think about it?" And so that's been fun.
That is. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, I've been taking into consideration the time, for the teachers. And I've kind of just offered my availability to be there to support them when they need it. And that was, after kind of giving a school-wide survey of what they felt like their needs were. And therefore, I'll just kind of adapt my project generally to those to the needs of the teachers, while also honoring the fact that maybe they don't have the time to get sustained, consistent professional development opportunities for math in particular.
Some good points, and hoping that just these little incremental shifts that we're doing, the impact that it has, that can be seen and allows the space for more. It's definitely an organic endeavor. So if you're interested, there's another resource on the navigation guide. It's a PD planning checklist that kind of just walks, it's kind of like, when we have our lesson plans, what kind of structures, things do we want to be mindful of? It offers that opportunity. So if that's something that aligns with what you're doing, that resource is there for you as well, if you're interested. All right. And we kind of reflected a little bit on this last time too. So here are the 4 big ideas of leadership in mathematics, and just kind of your project, which one resonates most with your project? You probably have elements of all of these kind of mixed in and intertwined. And as you go through your project, you'll probably find that more are coming in. But what's, just one that's really popping out to you? And has it shifted from the last time we shared?
Are you talking about the boxes, April, or the stuff out to the left?
Oh, thank you for the clarification. So on the left, these are the four guiding principles, and then each of those guiding principles has big ideas that they're driven by. So probably more of the on the left-hand side.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you
I
for
would
that.
say for my project, the student evidence, we've been as a department redesigning our projects, and I've found that my students have really enjoyed them. So like I've had some really good feedback from students on those projects. So anyways, that's what's going well for me.
Thank you.
And then for me, that bottom one there, just designing, implementing. I'm doing that, a plan that would help support high quality math teaching and learning for every teacher, kind of giving them the framework of maybe, aligning the dimensions math with the state standards and kind of go from there. Just give them kind of the framework.
Thank you. So yeah, just kind of keep this in the back of your mind because, in our development, in our leadership development, these are kind of the areas that we can play roles in. And so where are you kind of aligning and what are you wanting to focus on? So Math Leads project, a little bit follow up on our logic model. Thank you for those that had a chance to get those done. I believe we were able to get feedback to everyone. If you have not yet done that, would you please try and do that this week and then send an email to any of the three of us and let us know because we want to support and kind of help you with that as well. And having that logic model is really going to help us keep moving along these steps of our project. So we've got our needs assessment done. I think I'm just making kind of a big general assumption. I think most of us have our goals identified or really close in there. We're starting to look into that research and readings that's kind of driving where we're at. And then after that, we'll get into that logic model kind of helps outline that plan or those steps that we want to go through. So then we can be ready to just jump into our implementation and start playing. So I feel like most of us are kind of right around in this area here. So
April,
yes.
I had two questions. One, you had left some notes on mine and I made some changes. Do I just need to tell you so you can look at it again?
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, that would
Okay.
work. Thank you. Because yeah, otherwise I
And
don't.
then, okay, you don't know that I made the changes, I guess is what I'm asking.
I had not taken the time to go back and look. So thank you.
Okay, I had a few questions. So, and then as I've been filling out my hours, I'm a little stuck on the implementation and improvement plan because, like my goal, I'm working with somebody to make an improvement plan, but is working with her actually the implementation? Or is working with her the improvement plan and the implementation is giving it to the students? I don't, or am
Yeah,
I thinking too hard on this?
that's a really good question. And I think it kind of aligns with your goal because ultimately it's about impacting the students, right?
Yeah, in like enhancing their conversation and critical thinking skills.
And so kind of working together on that. So I think that's because bringing her in, that's part of the improvement plan because you're working together to design and create. Yeah, I'll have to look at your logic model and kind of see where that fit in and which of your goal. I can see, yeah, for both ways. And how do you count that? Absolutely. Definitely for students, it would be the implementation. So did you outline the structure and what the topics, the things that you're going to be talking about? And then as you get together, you're working that out, that would be implementation. And then maybe the improvement plan is what you are preparing to discuss together collaboratively.
I'll schedule a meeting with you and we can look at it because I had some questions on the paper as well. So
Sounds great. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So we are going to end a little bit early tonight. If you would please, please, please do the exit ticket, because this really does help us. We go back and look at that and think about what we can do for our next meeting. And that link to the exit ticket is on our navigation guide. I am happy to stay if anyone wants to visit, talk about the logic model, any other questions, happy to stay and we can still do that. And or if you just want this time to, you know, get going on your project for the next half hour or so late at night, right? Whatever. But thank you for coming. It's so fun to see you. And I love this time together because it's these conversations. We're our people. We get it. And so this is a lot of fun to be together. So thank you for coming. Wishing you a great rest of your evening and happy to stay and visit if you would like to.